I'm entering the zoo, looking to do some photography here today with the Fuji XF 70 to 300 millimeter lens using the Fuji XT5. I also brought with me the 1.4 extender. It's not something I've used quite often, and especially with this lens, so I'm anxious to see how well the lens and extender combination perform, and it would definitely be the first time using it here with the Fuji XT5. One big goal here today is to attach the 1.4 extender. That's something I've already had an opportunity to do, taking some photographs of the bald eagle. I was able to shoot some without the extender and then some attaching the extender. So that'll be a good test to see how the two images compare. One of the type of photographs that I love to shoot is I love to photograph animals and throw out that background where it's black. If you've been following my channel at all, you know that light to me is everything. I'm always looking for good light. In the case of the bald eagle with the white head and that yellow beak and those beautiful yellow eyes, I think it really lends itself for a really nice photograph. A couple of things about the Fuji XF 70 to 300 millimeter lens. Generally, I've been very happy with it. I've had it for a couple of years now. Got it as soon as it came out. I believe I replaced my, I think it was my 55 to 200 millimeter lens at the time. And I basically sold that one to purchase the 70 to 300. I like the longer range, and I like the fact that you could put a 1.4 extender. And that was my main reason for the switch over to this lens. Also, it's a lens that I feel will be great for travel photography. One thing that you all need to know about the Fujifilm XF 70 to 300 millimeter lens is this lens will go out of focus if you're zooming as you're trying to take a photograph. So keep that in mind. It's extremely disappointing and frustrating, but for some reason it's the way this lens is made. If you know, you're trying to shoot bird photography, which is something that I typically like to start out wide so that I can make sure I can find the bird and get it in the viewfinder where I want it, and I start to zoom in, while your pictures will go in and out of focus as you're zooming in and out. Generally what I do in that case is I just keep tapping that shutter button as I change my zoom range to help the system focus. I don't know why Fuji developed this lens this way, but it is what it is. I'm entering the area right now where they have exhibits of some of the birds found here in Florida. I am shooting JPEG right now. I may switch sometimes to RAW, but for right now I'm going to just keep everything at JPEG. I will do a couple of raw images because I want to try that new Lightroom feature that just came out with the high noise reduction. So I want to see how well that performs. Actually, not a lot of birds out here right now. Let's see now. There's a couple of rosette spoonbills with their heads tucked into their bodies. So I'm going to go ahead and move on from the Everglades exhibit. Not a lot going on there. I did get a couple of opportunities to photograph a couple of birds. Just really to test out the system. The 1.4 extender seems to not hinder the autofocus system in any way. It seems to focus just as well as if I did not have the extender attached. The autofocus box does bounce around a little bit when trying to focus on a bird. I think it doesn't focus as quickly or at a distance as far as like the Fuji XH would do. But if you don't own the XH, you wouldn't notice these limitations or perceived limitations right now by me. The XH2S has had a few firmware updates to improve the autofocus, and as far as I know, nothing for the XT5 or the XH2 to help the autofocus system. But from what I can see in the viewfinder, I would get a box on the bird, and it would try to find the eye and pretty much stick on the eye. As far as what I'm seeing in the viewfinder, I have to see if the images are sharp. It wasn't any kind of fast-moving action or anything like that, but I did take a shot or two of some birds in the water, or ducks, that were kind of swimming along in the water to see how the tracking performed. I did notice a couple of times where the autofocus would try to get on the reflection of the bird in the water. I guess it's understandable. It is seeing another face. That is something that I originally noticed with the XH2S. I think it's gotten slightly better. I don't know. It is something that this camera is also doing, but again, it makes sense. It is seeing a reflection of a face in the water. It's something that I wouldn't worry too much about. You will struggle with trying to move the box, because what I do is I actually have a box that I'm selecting and trying to put it on the face of the bird. If you're trying to put a box on the face of the bird, if you have eye detect turned on, it keeps finding an eye, so you're kind of fighting back and forth with the eye autofocus. And that's one reason which on the XH2S and the XH2 I've set up a button where I could turn the face and eye autofocus tracking on and off. I do miss the vertical grip a little bit. As a pro, you learn to keep your arms tucked in and not have your elbows sticking out. And I know there's if I hold the camera in a different way with the shutter button towards my waist instead of up above my head, then I can keep my arms tucked in. But that's just not the way I've shot. But it may be something I need to start adjusting and adapting to. I don't like the arms sticking all out and up in the air or out to the side, especially when I'm shooting vertical. Horizontal, it's no different. One thing I love about this 70-300 combination with the XT5 is you don't stick out like when you're shooting with a 100-400 or the 150-600 millimeter lens. So that's a real positive. Kind of nice sometimes to just be left alone and people not paying much attention to you. With the 1.4 extender, it gets you out to 630 millimeters because of the 1.5 crop factor of the Fujifilm cameras. The reason for that is the 70-300 at the long range is an equivalent to 450 millimeters. 630 millimeters at f8 is not bad. Consider the fact that the 150-600 is an f8 lens, and it's much longer and much heavier. So that's not bad at all if the performance is good. I think this could really be an excellent travel kit. Those big lenses are beautiful, and you want to always have them with you. You need to be realistic as to the fact that you want to be able to manage the hikes and not get exhausted. It will affect your photography if you are tired. Just to give you an idea how much you can zoom in with the extender attached. This is how far this lizard is. The eye autofocus did get on the eye of the lizard, even though I had the eye autofocus turned to bird and eye autofocus tracking. Nice job there by Fuji to go ahead and focus on a non-bird subject, and especially the small lizard. In the viewfinder, the box got right on the eyeball of the lizard, and I quickly snapped the photo before it ran away. Took a couple of photos of the harpy eagle. Again, had to bump up the ISO quite a bit. I set the bird and eye autofocus tracking on, and it was moving on and off the eye. I don't know how much of it was a struggle because of the fact that I do have a fence in front of me, and I'm trying to focus and frame through the openings in the fence. So, you know, I can't really judge the camera system for that. A quick thought on regarding the Fuji XT system. As far as the dials and that being what people love. I sat down here waiting for an animal and started changing the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO on the dials of the camera, and all this was done while the camera is turned off. And that's one big advantage of having dials like the Fuji XT system does, is you can go ahead and set up your camera without even having to turn it on. So just a quick thought about that, because a lot of people talk or have thoughts and opinions about whether they like the dials or not like the dials. And yeah, there's times that that could slow you down, but there's also times that it's faster and better. There's areas that if you could get the spider monkey to be in that location, you could actually get some photos that really look like they're out in the wild. I am seeing the spider monkey now kind of crawling around on the bottom here. It looks like there's at least 3 of them. Let me see if there's an image there to capture. So I had an opportunity to photograph something I don't typically bother with because I'm kind of bored of them already, but I had an iguana down on the grass chewing on, looked like a vegetable or certainly some kind of vegetation, but it looked like it was a decent enough photo to go ahead and see how the autofocus system performed. I was zoomed out all the way on the camera using the XF 70-300 millimeter with a 1.4 extender attached. And I thought it was a good opportunity because I had some blades of grass around it to see if that interfered with the autofocus system in any way. So we'll see how those turned out. Just had an amazing opportunity to take some photos of the African elephant. One of them went into the water that they have there, the little swimming pool area that they have for the elephants, and started playing around in the water. Next thing you know, the other one comes and starts standing there and watching them, and next thing you know, they're both in the water. I'd never seen that. Hopefully I got some good photo opportunities. The eye autofocus tracking was really struggling with that, but I could barely see the eye of the elephant in the viewfinder. I knew the eye was there because there's a dark circle where the eye is, but the eye autofocus didn't seem like it was ever coming on. But I was getting the square and I was placing it on the eye of the elephant, so hopefully that worked out that way. On the Fuji XT5, the AE lock button, I've gone ahead and set that where when I'm using any of the bird or animal or any of the autofocus tracking features, I can turn it on and off by pressing the AE lock button. And what I do is when the camera's struggling focusing on a subject, I'll go ahead and turn it off, or if I need to place the focus point in a different location other than the eye, I go ahead and turn that off, and I feel that that's worked out pretty good for me. With the elephant, I went ahead and changed my settings towards the final photographs to RAW because of the exposure was kind of difficult. I had to bump up the ISO quite a bit as they were quite active, and I was trying to get a sharp photo. For all of the photos of the elephant, I did have the 1.4 extender attached to the camera. I was zooming in back and forth a little bit depending on what the elephant was doing. It's quite a sizable animal, and it wasn't all that far from me. So I don't know how many of those images were at 400 millimeters, but it's a good test because it'll show me just how sharp the images can be at different millimeters with the 1.4 extender attached. I wouldn't say this is the ultimate test of it because it was a difficult lighting situation. It was a moving subject, and the focus was a challenge because of the eye being so dark. So we'll see how these turned out. Hopefully I got some good images out of that. So a couple of thoughts using the Fuji XT5 and Fuji XF 70 to 300 millimeter lens using the 1.4 extender. I am having issues with the autofocus tracking, finding the eye of animals. Don't necessarily know that there's an issue there, or these have been challenging animals. The elephant, I can it was really dark sockets around the elephant, but I was just taking some pictures of the giraffe, and was also having issues with the autofocus point getting on the eye. I just had an opportunity to take some photos of a giraffe doing a behavior that I'd never seen it do before. I thought maybe it was the mom or the parent trying to get rid of the baby giraffe by swinging its head and smacking it on the side of the giraffe, but it seemed that that was something they were both doing, as the baby also took its turns smacking the mom on the side of the body. I wonder if that's their way of showing affection. I was shooting at a high frame rate, 10 frames per second, and I am right now shooting raw images. The sun's quite high, and there's not a lot of clouds, and it's a bright, contrasty day. Also want to try that new feature in Lightroom and the editing, where you can do a high ISO processing to eliminate the noise, and I'm curious to see how that performs. I just switched out the battery for the first time today. I shot 443 photos. And this was not on a Fuji brand battery. This was on a brand by the name of Power Extra. It's a battery that I purchased on Amazon. So 443 images I'm pretty happy with. I am also using image stabilizer, and I'm actually using the image stabilizer where it's on all the time. So keep that in mind when I said I used I shot around 443 images with the one battery. The whole time was using the image stabilizer. So you may be asking yourself, why shoot with the image stabilizer on? Well, I'm at around 630 millimeters, and even if I was using the lens without the extender, at the long end is 450 millimeters. It's not a pleasant experience of taking photos with the with telephoto lenses where you're seeing so much shake and vibration. So that's reason number one that I have the image stabilizer on all the time when I'm shooting with telephoto lenses, especially handheld. I do set my aperture and my shutter speed. I don't let the camera do that for myself. I do have the camera set to live view so I can see the exposures inside the viewfinder, and I keep an eye on that scale on the left hand side to see just how much I'm overexposing or underexposing. I can't change the aperture much, and the ISO I would need to get up to the dial to move it. So what ends up changing a lot of times is the shutter speed. So if I end up with a shutter speed that's slower than 600th of a second, being zoomed out at 630 millimeters, it's important to have the stabilizer on so that I can get a sharp image. So I want to show you a feature that I love that as far as I know just about every Fujifilm camera has, and that's the ability to record a message to attach to your photographs. And I love to use this especially when photographing animals here at the zoo, where I can read what they are, and I can go ahead and record onto the actual image exactly what kind of animal it is. So I'm going to show you how to use that feature in the Fuji XT5. So you're in the play mode, you go ahead and hit menu, and right here you see that I have it turned on. If you hit menu, you'll see at the bottom it tells you to start recording. Press and hold the front dial. So it's the front rotating dial right here. So you're going to see now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to view the image. I'm going to press and hold the front dial, and you'll see I got a record button. Giant Elon. This is a giant Elon. Let go of the button and the recording is done. In Lightroom, you'll be able to see that there's a wave file, and you can go ahead and play that back. So that right there is one of my favorite features, and as far as I know, just about every Fuji camera that I own has it. Some of them actually you would hit the, I believe is on the XH2, you actually hold on to the autofocus on off button because the dials are not able to be pressed in. So I want to emphasize once again the one major issue thus far, and today I've really confirmed it with the Fuji XF70 to 300mm lens, is when you're zooming. I mean, any movement of the zoom ring, the image goes out of focus. So keep that in mind. It's really going to be difficult for bird photography because you're going to want to pick a range and stay there, or make sure you come up with a way of focusing often. I do it by tapping the shutter button as often as possible, where I stop zooming and the lens does quickly focus, but any movement of that ring, you're going to be out of focus. So I had an opportunity to take some photos of the African painted dog. That one's always a challenge, but I like photographing them because they typically are up and moving around. So they weren't moving around too much today, but I still had a couple of opportunities to take some photos as they ran around. The exposure in there is always difficult. I had to bump up the ISO quite a bit to try to get some photos as they were moving. First shot I took was at ISO 1600, and my shutter speed was only 400th of a second. So you can see there why I keep that image stabilizer on, is that 400th of a second a little slow for 600mm. So as I was saying, the African painted dog is always very challenging because of the fact that it's a cream colored animal that is running around. I'm trying to get a shutter speed that's fast enough to freeze the action, and also they're in an exhibit that's has a lot of light issues, and that white sand that they walk on doesn't help. So it's always a challenge to photograph in there. I've gotten some really nice photos, but always at the very high ISOs. I'm inside the aviary, and this will give me an opportunity to photograph some of the birds in here. The light's kind of peeking in and out right now. It's overcast, but hopefully we'll get a little peek of sun in here sometime soon. But this is going to give me an opportunity to photograph some of the birds in here. I'm right here in a small pond they have, and there's some ducks in the water, and they're floating around, and it's a good opportunity to try the bird focus autofocus tracking using the 1.4 extender. I've taken a few shots, not too many right now, but I did notice that the focus box was getting on the eye of the duck, and it was tracking. So hopefully I have some focus pictures. Just had an opportunity to photograph a really beautiful bird that showed up. My ISO was 6400, but my shutter speed was 1/1600th of a second, and the aperture obviously is f8. I was zoomed out pretty much all the way. I did move the zoom ring back and forth a little bit to try to compose and make sure I get the bird in the photo, but the focus box was getting on the bird, and hopefully ISO 6400 holds up pretty well. I did shoot that raw, so I'm hoping that I can make it look really nice. I'm trying the new Lightroom denoise to see how well that performs. If I don't like it with that, perhaps with Topaz I can make a really nice photo out of that. I've definitely had quite a few challenges and opportunities to try this combination of lens, teleconverter, and camera. So I'm optimistic and anxious to see how these pictures turn out. So I brought the camera down low and flipped that screen down that everybody loves. And I've gotten some photos in the past shooting this way, and I really like the low angle, and being down at the bird or the duck's perspective really makes for some interesting photographs. The image of this bird, I went ahead and adjusted myself. Got birds flying all around me. I went ahead and adjusted myself multiple times, trying to find an angle where I could get a nice clean background that looked like environment and not like the concrete floor. And I think I was able to pull it off in this photograph. The shutter speed on this picture was 1/500th of a second. The The ISO is 4000. Image stabilizer needed to do its job, and the shutter speed was hopefully good enough. And also the high ISO at 4000. We'll see how that looks, and then we're going to go ahead and process this in Lightroom and see how the processed image looks. I'm also zoomed out all the way using the 1.4 teleextender, so I'm at 630 millimeters. So all the factors are in there as far as everything you would want to see out of this combination. Zoomed out all the way, 630 millimeters, and the challenge of high ISO and slow shutter speed with the image stabilizer turned on. So these headshot photos of the birds is a great example of how you can still throw out backgrounds and make it blurry when photographing with lenses that are 5.6 aperture. Keep in mind that yes, it's at f8, but the aperture is really 5.6. It's f8 as far as the equivalent to the amount of light that you're getting in. But I am wide open as much as I can be with this lens, and that makes it an f8. As you can see from these photographs, if you can get the subject to be far away from the background, and you zoom in as much as possible. In this case, I'm zooming in 630 millimeters. You could really throw out that background and get a really nice soft bokeh. So hopefully these images will be sharp so that I can show you what I'm talking about, because if they're not in focus, then the photo's useless. But anyways, I've been pretty happy for the most part. I love the setup because it's light and small. I feel like I can photograph comfortably, quickly. Because of the fact that the gear is small, you can maneuver yourself around pretty good. You can bend down, you know, bring the camera up to take a photo pretty quick. It's the one thing that I really love about this setup, and I'm hoping that the image quality is great, because I would like to make this a part of my travel kit. Had a really good time out here. I've had plenty of opportunities for photographs. Got to photograph many different animals, and got to see a few things in photograph that I hadn't seen before, like what the elephant was doing in the water, and the giraffe. So those are pretty cool. Hope you guys enjoy this video. I ask you to please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.